Jeffrey. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for being here today. Very excited to be at the Innovation Exchange this year, and very happy to be here with Nick Graham, who's going to be carrying most of the water today, and very happy that you're here, especially in Coke country. To present
I know, I feel a little bit like the intruder in the midst in here. It's a little bit scary.
Well, Nick's got a really great case study, and I'm going to try not to stand in the way of that today, but I do want to give you kind of a 1-minute overview of what we do at DebtCheck, just so you have a sense of what we do.
Yes, so we can use that.
So our big point of differentiation is our speed. We're probably one of the fastest full-service vendors out there that you're going to see. And a lot of that is because of the innovation that we created, which is around automated recruiting. We use it for both qualitative studies and quantitative studies, and we have a patent pending on that approach. And what that means for our clients is that we can turn around things very quickly, and Nick is going to address that in his case study. And lastly, is that not working? Okay. And lastly, it enables this thing that we call agile market research, which is a very iterative approach to research that we think lends to very good quality. And again, Nick is going to talk about this in the case study.
Yeah, you need that again.
So in terms of how we do it, we have what we call an on-demand community solution, which is another way of saying that we do both quantitative and qualitative methods depending on what the research problem is. We also fulfill that through an online research strategy group. So it's a full-service group that's focused on getting you the answers that you need, and they leverage this platform every day on our clients' behalf. And then finally, about 90% of the work we do is in the concept world and also the creative messaging world. So we're very focused on that, and we specialize in it. And again, it's what the case is about today. You know, one of the great things about being a younger vendor in this market and having an innovation is that we get to work with a lot of great brands. And the brands that you see up here, other than being really interesting companies in a diverse set, they all have something in common. The one thing is they're all very innovative and they're progressive as it relates to doing their research. The other thing about them is they have individuals within those groups that we work with that are also very forward-leaning and very progressive in terms of what they do. And are at conferences like this because they want to adopt new ways of doing things. And Nick and his colleague, Jane Hickey, over at Pepsico, are certainly of that ilk. And so really pleased to hear the case with Nick today.
Well, thank you. Oh, no, this is working. Can I have that one? Thank you. Well, thank you for the very glowing introduction. I'll try and live up to those expectations. So as kind of Matt kind of slightly alluded to, I sit within the global groups at PepsiCo. And we like to think that we try and do things a little bit differently. So to kind of give you a flavor of the culture of working in the global groups at Pepsi, I thought it would be useful to share with you the quote that's actually etched into the floor of our Global Design and Innovation Center in New York City. So it's the first thing that you see when you get here. And it's this: we are crazy enough to think that we can inspire the future. So you'll remember it from the Steve Jobs Apple TVC. I actually think, to be honest, I was thinking about this last night, this phrase would do really well as a tagline for this conference, actually, because I think there's some really inspirational, some really crazy thinking going on, which is fantastic to see. But basically, you think about it, this is really kind of the mantra for the global groups. We try and do things a little bit differently. We like to think of ourselves as the grain of sand in the oyster. The thing that's going to challenge things, shake things up a bit, is going to challenge and disrupt the model. So when it comes to the Global Insights function, what that means in practice is that we just try to do research differently. So it's fantastic. We came up with these kind of big 4 principles. They're not revolutionary. They make a lot of sense given what I've seen over the last 2 or 3 days. But they are basically just ways that we're trying to make research a little bit better and inspire the future of research, both within our own company and hopefully some of our partner companies as well. So the kind of key things we're looking for research that's a little bit deeper, that goes beyond that kind of system 2, very cognitive, very rational, very kind of surface response to stuff. Particularly, you think a lot of the categories that we work in, soda, chips, where a lot of that's very habitual purchasing. People aren't really sure why they buy Pepsi over Coke. But there's a lot of subliminal messaging, for example. So the other thing we're trying to do is be more collaborative. You know, one of the amazing things about being at this conference is just seeing the whole dynamic of research shift from being the, I'm going to come to you and ask you a set of questions, to let's have a dialogue with consumers, let them start the conversation. The other thing is being more predictive of consumer behavior. So not just how something's going to test, but actually how a consumer is going to react as a result. And the last, but by no means least principle, is faster. I actually got a request today, could we test 15 concepts by Friday? Those are the type of kind of things that I get from the board at the moment. So you can imagine, under a lot of pressure to deliver deeper insight at much faster speed. And the case study I want to share with you today that we worked on with our friends at GutCheck, I think speaks to some of these key principles and actually talks about, you know, you don't have to trade off some of the quality, some of the collaborativeness, some of the predictiveness when you're actually moving at speed, particularly in the early stage concept development phase. So, what was the challenge that we were facing? So this is actually a live project that we're working on right now. I would love to tell you more, but given we are in Coke country, you know, I have to be a little bit careful, otherwise I'll probably be shot. But suffice to say, it is a new beverage concept. I think you can pretty much wrap your heads around that. So we've done a ton of qualitative research across the globe to really understand this new idea. And we come up with loads of fantastic ideas, different positioning ideas, different flavors, different packaging ideas. And everyone was getting really excited. They're like, yeah, this is a really great idea. The problem with excitement is then the marketing team and the internal team are like, great, get it into StageGate, get it into Snapshot, we need results, we need to be able to share it with the market. And suddenly you're kind of fast-tracking a process when you're not quite ready. So, you know, we did our very best to put together some really good concepts based on the qualitative research that we'd done. But the reality is, you know, hindsight is 20/20, right? You know, we weren't ready for basic Snapshot. You know, we didn't have everything locked down. You know, we still weren't sure exactly what the branding was going to be, what the positioning was going to be. So there's still a lot of kind of floating variables that we're trying to work with. Anyway, we put together our best effort. We send it off into bases, kind of praying that this is going to soar. And then the results come back. And it crashed and burned. Oh my God, like you will not believe. It was my worst ever Friday afternoon, I can tell you. It came back and I was like, oh, really? Not only do you feel like we felt so disappointed that we thought we'd put our best foot forward, but also you kind of felt we felt really frustrated because honestly, beyond telling us that some of the flavors were quite polarizing, there really wasn't a lot that Bases could tell us about what was wrong with the concept. But we knew from all of the work we'd done, it was a really great idea, but for some reason it wasn't really working from a concept standpoint. And of course, you know, that pressure hadn't gone away from the marketing team to get this thing into StageGate and into Snapshot as soon as possible. So this is where the story diverges. I mean, typically what I've seen at Pepsico, and I've seen at lots of big corporate companies, we kind of go, holy moly, what are we going to do now? Okay, let's all get in a room, and let's all, our 40, 50-somethings, you know, let's all try and work out what would a 21-year-old want in a concept. Let's try and have a quick go at writing this concept. Let's put it back into Bases. It didn't work. Okay, let's try again. Let's try it again, and we put it back into Bases. And we kind of end up on this kind of vicious hamster wheel, this hamster wheel of hell, going round and round and round. And you feel you're moving forwards, but you're not really moving forward. You're just really spinning around in circles. So I love hamsters, but I do not love hamster wheels. And really that's the moral of this story. If you take away nothing else, take away that. So we kind of went to our friends at GutCheck and said, look, can we develop a different way of doing this early stage concept development? Can we avoid getting trapped in the hamster wheel? And I said, look, we need a couple of things. We need to understand, we need to diagnose what was the problem with the concept. We know it's a good idea, but the concept's just not, the concept sucks. Like, just tell us why it's sucking. The other thing is, rather than us sitting in a room and deciding what consumers would like, let's get the consumer voice into building and co-creating the concepts with us so we can really understand and build it from their perspective. And finally, again, last but not least, please tell us it's going to test better this time because, you know, I don't think I can go through that Friday afternoon again. But also, like, very honestly, from, you know, any big kind of corporate company, you know, you can fail once at Bases, and you know what? It's not a big deal. You know, your idea has a chance of survival. You fail twice, you fail 3 times, your concept is dead on arrival. Like, you know, there's no more kind of leeway, there's no more hall pass the more times that it fails. So we really needed to get this right. So basically, we took the initial ideas that we'd taken into Bases. We did an initial quant screen with the community that Matt and the team put together with our core target audience to basically just get a baseline read that we could then see test against later. We then did some really in-depth qualitative research. Over about 4 or 5 days, we did an amazing amount of kind of rich qualitative research online with the community to really understand. We dissected the concepts, we looked at the visuals, we looked at the language, we looked at different packaging solutions. So we were really able to blow out all of the different options and get to a really strong concept that we were excited about. We optimized that, and then because our friends were worried about our sanity, we then took it back into another quant screen before we went into bases to get a read on whether or not we'd moved the needle. So the biggest takeaway, and it seems so blindingly obvious now, but it wasn't blindingly obvious when we were building the concept. One of the biggest things is it's the implicit stupid. Like, that was the bit that we were missing. We know as good market researchers that the implicit kind of subconscious codes and cues of the concept play a huge role in determining how consumers react to the concept. So the visuals, the tonality. But you know what? As anyone can testify who's ever written a concept for bases or any kind of testing, what do we obsess about? We obsess about the words. Is it a word A or word B? And we agonize over, does the proposition really pay off the insight? Does the reason to believe? You know what? Consumers aren't even getting to that point. They're making a judgment based on the first thing that they see on the concept. So just to give you a little bit of background on this, obviously it's been anonymized, I'm afraid. So some of the very abstract images that the brand team wanted to put in because they thought it brought to life the brand idea, consumers are like, oh, what the hell does this mean? Like, I don't know how this fits with the concept whatsoever. And some of the stuff we thought we were being clever with, like we used this imagery to try to convey the different flavor combinations that we had in the product. They were like, well, first of all, that looks artificial, and that's the complete opposite of what you're telling me in the concept. So you're actually, what we think we're doing to try and elevate the engagement with the concept is actually creating like a cognitive dissonance with really what we're trying to do from the verbal standpoint. And then actually on the packaging, the other interesting thing was, we had to put in some placeholder packaging because as I said we hadn't finalized what the packaging should be. And what we saw is when we dissected that from a consumer standpoint, that was giving off all of the wrong codes and cues. It was they were saying it's the wrong target audience. They were saying it's the wrong occasion. It was giving all of these associations, which again was the opposite of what we were trying to convey in the concept. So we revised the concept, and actually the biggest thing that changed was the visuals and the layout and the packaging. The words, we didn't really change a lot. We actually changed the tonality, because interestingly, again, the tonality was the biggest kind of thing that was putting people off rather than the actual language. So we took that in, started praying again, and then we took that into the final kind of quant screen with gut check to see how we'd done. So, versus the original kind of baseline quant screen that we'd done. And this was a much better Friday, I can tell you. This was a much better Friday when Matt and the team called us with this particular information. And the amazing thing is, the two amazing things about this, not actually the huge uplift that we'd seen. The amazing things were we hadn't really fundamentally changed the core idea of the concept. The core idea was exactly the same. What we changed is the way that we'd presented it. And that, for me, was like a mind-blowing kind of realization. The other thing is we did this in 2 weeks. So we did the whole thing from coming out of bases like with tears in our eyes to actually kind of having a final concept that we really felt confident and excited about. We did this in 2 weeks, which, again, it shows that we were able to get some real depth and quality without having to sacrifice the timeline. And actually, I was joking to Matt earlier, we didn't even have the bases results until last week. So we'd signed up to present this with no bases results. So I guess in a way that shows that I was confident this was going to be a success. And luckily, this was a success. So the right-hand side is obviously where we are now versus where we were. And you'll see on some of the big things, the big success factors, need design, message communication, some of the consumption metrics, we made like a significant change from where we were. And for me, I think the big implications of all of this are, keep in mind the real power, both positive and negative, of those kind of implicit cues and codes in the concept. So, it is the implicit stupid. Like, let's really remember to think about the concept in its holistic sense rather than just the language. The next two kind of points go together, which is, we need to be we need to challenge ourselves a lot more to use basis testing and concept testing at the right point and don't rush into concept testing before we're ready. So taking the time, and again, it's only 2 weeks, but taking that time to really properly build and develop the concept with the gut check guys got us to a much better place than we would ever have gotten to before. And it means that when we go into basis testing, we can do it with the confidence, you know what, we can test once, test well. That gives us that confidence to believe that. And then finally, it gives us the confidence to actually get off that hamster wheel and leave the hamster wheels to the hamsters. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ooh.
So we have time for a question. Microphone? Here comes the microphone. Microphone's right behind you. Sorry, you've been preempted. We'll get to you next.
This sounds like a newer process. This sounds like a newer process that you're doing. How do you get the next step right, where you have to go from concept to package to product? Like, what observations do you have about translating this conceptual win into a marketing?
Yeah, the interesting thing about that is by doing this process, we actually learned so much about the packaging and about all of the other elements of the concept. And I think the thing is sometimes what we think is get the concept right, then we'll worry about the packaging or the product flavors. But the reality is the consumer's responding to all of those things together. And actually, by doing this process, particularly the qualitative piece, where we really deconstructed all of the elements, we could start to get a sense of, and it's not the final answer, but to kind of get a sense of, you know, this type of packaging or this type of route is going to be much more powerful. So it sometimes feels like you're taking a step back, but I think actually it allowed us to take 2 steps forward because we had a much better sense of where to prioritize. Even if we didn't have the absolute final answer, we had a sense of really where to prioritize on those other elements of activation. So I think it really helped in a number of ways. Yeah.
We have a microphone in the back, and then we'll get to you.
Okay, sorry.
What role do you think context plays in doing this kind of testing, like, you know, with an ad or even with actual product packaging?
Yeah, that was a very good point, because that was one of the biggest challenges we realized with the first basis test that we did, is we hadn't really set the context for expectations, both in terms of where people were going to buy it, what kind of mindset they were going to be in. So one of the big learnings from the gut check stuff was actually, to your point, was to really help kind of frame that context up. Now, basis is, for all of its great strengths, it is a bit of a blunt tool. So, you know, it kind of pretty much sets some very basic expectations. But what this helped us do is get people in the right mindset through some of the visual cues, through the packaging, through even the language that we were using, so that we made sure that people kind of came to it with the right set of expectations. But you're absolutely right. Context is absolutely key for this stuff.
Okay, so you may have just answered it, but my question is, you know, you said the problem in the original was you were missing the implicit.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask, what specific techniques in the new version did you use to get at implicit information?
You want to talk about some of that? Or?
Yeah, well, I can't go into kind of the specific questions that we answered in terms of kind of the discussion guide that we used, but you know, we work, like I said, in product work every day, in message testing every day, and over the thousands of studies we've done, we've come up with our set of questions that will get at the objectives that our clients have. So when we engaged with Nick and Jane, we understood what they were going after. We crafted that discussion guide to drive what they were going after, and that was the result.
So it was more just interviewing in a different way.
Yeah, we knew, again, because of the quant, we had a good sense of the diagnostic in terms of what the issues were, so we could craft questions around that so we could prescribe a certain action.
I think it would have been, actually, just to build on that point, I think, you know, obviously, we would like to have done some of the implicit response testing. I think that would definitely have been an area that we would look at. Right where we were, you know, we even just even deconstructing the concept, showing people different options, getting a sense of what was working, what was not working, was a great step forward. But I think some of that implicit response stuff would definitely be a big value add on top of that.
So I know we have some more questions, but we are out of time. But you guys, if you could go back one slide, you guys have a conference room?
Yeah. We'll be in conference room 6 for a while, both Nick and I, to answer any questions about the case study or otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you.